this session, we're going to talk about academic reading for those of you who are doing Introduction to English. And I want to equip you with some basic techniques for what you're going to be required to do this semester, particularly with reading academic articles. So let's kick off and look at some of the things that you're going to need when you're going to be doing academic reading. The first and most important thing is that academic reading is not like any other reading you will do. You're going to spend a hang of a lot of time taking little bits of reading and making sure that you understand them fully. So academic reading is a slow type of reading. It's where you take your time to make sure that you have understood all of the words that you're going to encounter, that you understand what those words mean when they're next to other words, so that you understand where the person who is writing this is going. There's always an aim with the reading that you're going to be doing. So let's have a look at your plan. First, you need to be clear about what your goals are for the reading that you're doing. So perhaps you are, as you will be doing now in your class, writing a short essay. So all of the reading that you're going to be doing is related to that essay. So for example, your essay is about Iskatamia, and you are going to argue, and in one of the other videos, you're going to learn how to argue in an academic setting. You are going to argue that Iskatamia is it is changing because of all sorts of outside influences that are coming in on it. Okay, so you are going to say what those reasons are for it being changed. But you're going to do some very in-depth reading around that. So when you are reading, you're going to have goals about why you're reading, because then you're going to be looking for certain things. In your research for this semester, you're going to be looking at reasons for why Iskatamia is changing, why it is a changing genre. Okay? Then you're going to make notes while you are reading, and you're going to use a highlighter or a pencil to mark the reading. Okay, we're going to look at that just now, how to do that, and what you might write down. What are the kind of notes you will make when you read? What parts of the reading will you underline, or what will you highlight? Okay, and in this sense, you don't need to have a photocopied or a printed piece of paper with the reading on it. You can do that on your computer, and you can use a highlighter on your computer. You don't need to print it out, okay? Then you also need your cell phone. And the reason you need your cell phone is because when you get to a word that you don't understand, you can quickly put it into Google and say, let's say the word homogeneous comes up, which we're going to look at a little bit later in this lesson. And you don't know what that means. You type it into Google, and then next to the word you write meaning. And Google will give you a definition of the word, and not only will it give you a definition, but it'll allow you to hear what the word sounds like so that you know how it's pronounced. Okay. This is very, very important when you are doing academic reading, because if you don't understand all the words, how will you be able to understand what the author is trying to say? So in your notebook, you're also going to write the meaning of words that you do not know. And then this is very, very important. You're going to read slowly and carefully. The whole idea with academic reading is to make sure that you understand what the person who wrote this article is saying, so that you can apply it in your own writing. So it's very important to read slowly. Let me give you an example. You're going to have 2 readings to read for this Iskatamia essay, and they're about 25 pages each. Those readings should take you about 4 hours each to read. That seems like a very long time for 25 pages, but you're going to look at all sorts of words that you don't understand. The time that you take to look up those words and see what they mean in context takes time. And after you've read a paragraph, you may need to say to yourself, what did this paragraph mean? What was the author trying to say? How am I going to make a note about that? So we'll talk about that in a minute. even me now at my stage as an academic in my own career, it takes me long to read an academic article. I still come across words that I've never seen before and that I need to look up. So for even me, who is a first language English speaker and a professional academic, I still need to do lots of groundwork when I'm doing academic reading, and it does take me longer. So if it takes longer for me, it's going to take long for you. So set aside a long time to read those 2 articles that I have assigned for that essay. It's going to give you an upper hand when you know exactly what those articles are saying. Let's have a look at some examples that you will encounter when you are working on your final project. And I'm not taking Eschatomia now in particular. I'm going to choose another topic which you'll also be working on. Let's first talk about how you're going to find sources. So for your final project, I've already assigned sources, but when you are out in the real world of your academic degree, you'll need to find sources on your own. And I'm going to give you a sure way to find things easily on Google. The first thing is, always try and work through the UKZN library page. And the reason for this is, when you are logged in through the UKZN library webpage, any article or e-book that is available through our library here at UKZN will be accessible to you directly through that UKZN library webpage. If you just look it up on Google, you won't be able to access them necessarily because they're under copyright. But our library has permission to use some of these things. So when you look it up through the UKZN library webpage, it gives you automatic access, which is incredibly helpful. You can also use this access when you are at home. You don't need to be on campus for it. You just need to log in. It'll prompt you with your student number and your password, and that will get you e-access onto the UKZN library page. So always make it a practice to look for sources through the library webpage. And if you look at the screen now, you'll see how to get to the UKZN library webpage through Google. You simply write UKZN library and press enter, and you'll find all of the links that you need. So just click onto that UKZN library webpage, and then this is what you will get. That's the page that it will look like, okay? And you'll see in that red box that there are several words: iCatalog, ebooks, journals, research space, and Google Scholar. Now, my recommendation for you, when you are looking for articles, and you'll see when you've watched all of the videos that we've created on academic sources, that there are many different types of sources: books, journals, newspapers, primary resources, all of those kind of things. We are looking for specific things when we are doing research. And usually journal articles have the most detailed information that you need. So to find good journal articles that are up to date, the best search engine to use is Google Scholar. And you can see that on that red box. If you look at the screen now, you'll see the little red box. Right at the end of that red box where iCatalog is Google Scholar. So click onto Google Scholar, and then we'll type in world music. Okay, that's just for example now. Okay, and you're going to do a project on world music for your bibliography project, so this might help you. Type in world music and click on search, and this is what you will get: a whole lot of articles that are related to world music. And they're not just articles on the internet. These are articles that come from journals. So that means that they've gone through the peer review process. Also, it will show you any books that are available on this topic. And what is even nicer is that it will indicate to you if the book is in our library at UKZN. If you are working just with a journal article and you click on any of these things, it should open it for you directly in your web page through the library web page. Okay, and so that's one of the advantages of logging in through the library's web page, because you'll have direct access to those articles. So if you look at your screen now, you'll see 2 articles at the top. One is called World Music, Deterritorializing Place and Identity, and the second one on redefining the local through world music. And we're going to look at these 2 articles to give you some hints about academic reading. So here's the first one: world music, deterritorializing Place and Identity by two authors, John Connell and Chris Gibson. Now, at the top of most journal articles is something which is called an abstract. And if you look at your screen now, you'll see that's exactly what follows just after the main title and the authors. So if you have a look there, it says abstract. And that little thing there, that abstract, is very helpful. It gives you a summary of the whole article. Usually that summary includes things like, what is the article about? What did the authors find? And what do they propose you do about what they found? So let's just have a look at that again. The main arguments, and you're going to learn about what arguments are in our videos, so don't worry about that if you don't understand it yet. The main arguments and the overall findings, and then often they add what you should do about those overall findings, okay? So that's what it's about. It's a summary of all the things that are included in the article. What's nice is if you read the abstract, you can see immediately if this is going to be helpful for you or not. You don't need to read the whole article. You just read the abstract and it'd say, I've read the abstract and I see that this is on a completely different topic from what I'm going to be writing about. So I'm not going to read this. Okay? That's the helpful thing about the abstract. But sometimes you see something in the abstract that does catch your attention and that is related to what you're going to be researching. Then you read the article. Sometimes, by the way, if you see that part of the abstract is talking about what you are going to be researching, you don't have to necessarily read the whole article. You may just read that section that is relevant to what you're doing. That's specifically like, for example, when you are doing something about the history of somebody and their background. And if you're just looking for stuff about their childhood, for example, then you may just read that section of the article about their childhood. You don't need to necessarily read about the rest of their life. But it will become clear to you. Remember, I said at the beginning, you need to have a goal about what you are looking for. Otherwise, you're just reading for the sake of reading. If you have a goal about what you're looking for, you can be much more clear about what you're going to read and what you're not going to read. So the abstract will help you to identify which things you are going to be looking out for in the article. Another helpful thing about the abstract is because it lists the main arguments of the article, you will begin to see how authors create arguments around topics. Okay, this is one of the important things about writing in formal academic sense. Okay, you're going to have to make arguments about particular things. You're going to have to take a stand about what you are writing about and say, this is, according to these sources, this is what the history is, or this is what happens when this happens, okay? So you are always going to be looking very carefully at how people create arguments and how you can absorb those arguments into your own sense of writing. So let's have a look at some examples now about how you might use underlining and highlighting in your reading. So this comes from the other article about defining the redefinition of world music, or local through world music. So this is the first paragraph. And usually the first paragraphs of an article detail exactly what the author is going to do. So if you have a look at that first section there where I have highlighted, it starts with the word how. How the status of the local has been transformed within contemporary society. So this article is about how the status of the local has been transformed within contemporary societies. So there may be words in there that you do not understand. So you're going to look up any of those words. So for example, contemporary. If you don't understand what the word contemporary is, you'll type it into Google and go and have a look. It means something that is happening now or at the time that you are writing. So contemporary societies means societies now, at this time. You'd write contemporary means blah, blah, blah in your notes. But you'll also write in your notes, hey, this article is about the transformation of local identities. because this is what the author has said this is about. But the author carries on to say, I will use the phenomenon of world music as a case in point to assess the primacy of this question in the ongoing politics of popular musical culture. So this person is using world music to talk about politics, okay? Politics in popular musical culture. And you'll find that when we write about music in contemporary society, often it's about power play. Who has power? When they write lyrics, when musicians write lyrics, sometimes they use their power as musicians to get a message across, maybe a political message, maybe a social message. Sometimes the power of music is related to who gets access to music, all right? So is this popular music or is it not so popular music? If it's not so popular music, who has the power to make it popular? Of course, recording agencies and that kind of thing have huge amounts of power within society to make or break somebody's career. So often when we write about music, we're looking at the power interplay between those who create music and those people who market music and those people who create names for themselves in the music industry. So that's one of the substrata of what we look at in academic studies of music. Just one aspect, of course. So this article is about that. It's about politics in music, about the power of music. All right. So in our notes, we might write, this article is about the status of local. What does local means? It means here, right now, in this area. So, for example, in South Africa, local would be what we do in Durban. Okay. What we do in South Africa is not local. Local is in each area. So something that we do in Durban is local. Something that they do in Cape Town, which is different, is local to them. All right. So the status of local. What does the status mean? It means how important local is. All right. The author uses world music as a case study. Well, a case study is something when you look at a particular instance of something in society to make a generalization about it. Okay. So you look at one particular part of society and that gives you information about what could be happening in the rest of society. So that's a case study. This person is looking at local through world music to determine what the politics of music might be. All right, so that gives us an idea of what the article is about. And those are the notes we might write about them. In your notebook, use your own words. Always important. When you write an academic article, you're always trying to let your own voice come out. So when you write your notes, write them in your own words, using your own words, so that when you do your own essay, it starts to come out in your own voice rather than the voice of the person who was writing the article. Very, very important. All right, now let's look at another example. This is from the same article, and you'll see that I have highlighted a particular section. It says, for some, it has come as a reaction linked with the fear of losing cultural identity in the face of worldwide homogenization. For others, defining the local has been perceived as an opportunity to redefine and promote local identity. So this is an important part of the article. It's telling us something about what people or how people have generally reacted to local or what is local. Now, what it's basically saying is this. Some people worry about losing their cultural identity because of a much more powerful cultural identity that is taking over. Now, you'll see a word in there which I mentioned earlier in this video, homogenization. For many of you, you won't know what that word is, or you may have seen it in another context. So in another context, milk is homogenized often. But in an academic sense, we're not talking about the process that milk goes through to be made healthy for us to drink. Okay, that's a different kind of homogenization, although that is actually linked in meaning. But homogenization in this sense is about when one kind of something is taking over. Okay, so let's think of American culture, for example. American culture has a homogenizing effect across the whole world. So that means that it's taking over and making one culture rather than many different cultures. The cultural values of Americanism, it's the way that people dress, the way that people eat, the way that people speak, is influenced very strongly by one culture to the detriment of other cultures. So that means that the other cultures are being diminished as a result. So homogenization is when other cultures begin to adapt and change to that one culture and become more and more like it, so that it's one. Homo means one, okay? So that's important. When you don't understand a word, look it up and write the meaning of it, okay? So let's have a look at what we might write in our notebooks. Firstly, we see that there is power in cultural identity. When you read that little section, there is power in cultural identity because some people are wary of losing power. Some people are using that power to redefine themselves. Okay? That's basically what's being said there. There is power in cultural identity. Then, homogenization is making everything the same. When it's put next to worldwide homogenization, it's when one culture dominates all the other culture. And then I put the example, like American culture. Okay. Then smaller cultural groups are scared that their traditions will be lost. That's the one point. The second is that other people are more positive about using their cultural practices to attract attention. So there are two sides of this coin, very important sides. One is that people are acting out of fear, and the other is that people are acting out of opportunity. Okay? So when you see those two things, you see, this article is about people who are fearful on the one hand, and people who are using this as an opportunity on the other. And the way that people react to those power situations is going to be very different. They're going to use their power in very different ways. On the one hand, those who are protecting are going to use their power to try and protect their culture. On the other hand, the other people are trying to project their culture with their power. Different uses of power, and that's what the article is going to tell you about. If you know that in your notes, then you're already on the right track. Okay, so that's why making notes is so important. Here is another little section, and these two sections which I'm going to show you are related. So this is in the same article about world music. For the small and industrially developing countries, world music has in many ways contributed to the redefinition of the local. Now, this would be interesting for us in South Africa because we are a small and industrially developing country. South Africa is one of those. So for us, this might be true. World music might be helping us to redefine the local. Okay, and that's important. So that's why I've highlighted it. This is perhaps relevant to our situation. So if you were writing about world music in South Africa, this little section that comes below may be of great importance to us. Let's look at this next section. At another level, world musics have contributed to some degree to the repositioning of local cultures to which they were associated, by being part of a world movement that advances the desire of every nation not only to be recognized, but also to participate in the workings of global economics and power. Now that sounds like quite a mouthful, but what the person is saying is, if you're in the context of being a small industrialized or industrializing developing country, you may be dreaming of the fact that because you are small, your voice is small, that your voice is still heard. All right, so imagine that the overarching culture is American. We are South African, and we want our voice still to be heard within this greater sphere of American music. Okay? And we also want to participate in that huge musical industry that drives the American economy. If it drives the American economy, it also drives ours. Now think carefully about this. When we listen to music on the radio, when we listen to music in movies, when we see music on TV, often it is from America. But an interesting thing has recently happened. I'm sure you're familiar with the song Jerusalema. Jerusalema has been in the opposite direction. Instead of us receiving music from the West, from America or from Europe, that song, Jerusalema, has gone out into the world from South Africa. I've seen videos of people in America, in Spain, in England, in Greece even, dancing to Jerusalema, okay? That song is a peculiarly and wonderfully South African song. It represents some of South Africa's ideals and identities. And yet, it has gone out into the world and made a difference to people's lives far away from us and in cultures that have traditionally been dominant over us. So there's been a reverse. This is what this little passage is all about. Okay, it's telling us that this is what it's about. So when you see something like that, immediately you're going to say, okay, this actually applies to us and what our voice is. Can I think of something that relates to it? Is there an example that I know, like Jerusalema, which fulfills this? So in my notes, I might write, world music has created a space for redefining what local means. What does it mean to have local music? And what does local mean in each particular case? And then world music has given a voice to smaller cultural groups within the global economy. So in world terms, South African culture is actually just a very small part of many, many cultures. But because of that song going global, Jerusalema going global, it has had a huge impact in a very short space of time and allowed people to look at South African culture with new lenses. So we have a voice, we have a new voice that people appreciate. Now, when you've got to the end of an article, you should have a whole lot of notes and also several parts of your article underlined or highlighted. And this will help you to gather all of the information that you need. But when you get to the end of that, you're going to need to bring together your ideas to be able to write about them. So you're going to examine the notes that you have written about the reading that you have done. If you have been writing those notes in your own words, you will have understood it carefully in your own way of thinking. And that's important. That's why I say use your own words to write about what you're reading. Don't just copy out what you see in the article. Make it your own so that when you start writing about it, it's easier to write in your own voice. Okay? We always, as markers, as lecturers, we want to see that you are developing your own way of thinking. If you just keep on reproducing what other people are saying and thinking, that's not your own thinking. All you are demonstrating there is that you can take something out of its context and put it into a new context. Okay? Even a grade 1 can do that. But you at university now, you are showing us that you can take something, make it your own, and apply it to something else. Your own context. All right. So when you are making notes, make them your own. All right. Examine the notes that you've done. And then try to bring all of those sections that are similar together. So if you've been reading about world music, like that article that we've just been reading about, all the sections that are about those people who were acting out of fear that their culture might be diminished because of homogenization, if you bring all of the stuff that you've read about those people who act out of fear together, you can write a paragraph about those who act out of fear. Then you can bring all the sections that you've read about those who act out of trying to project their culture onto in outward direction so that they get more fame from it, for example, or that their culture gets more fame. Because it's different from the one that you've been doing with the fear, you can draw all of those together and then write a paragraph about it. But you may find some very interesting things as you read, that they are never just black and white in terms of different ideas. There's not always just one pole and then another pole. There's always a very large gray area in between. So you may find, for example, when you read this article, that on the one side, there are those who are fearful. On the other side, there are those who are projecting. But in between, there are a whole lot of characteristics or different types of people that are acting out of a bit of both of these things. And then because you've made your notes and you know what they are doing, you can write a paragraph about everybody that's in between, not just those who act out of fear and not just those who are projecting their culture, okay? So there's always that sort of gray area that we also want to look at and comment about. Another very important thing is to see how authors write about a particular topic. What do they look for when they are examining something or analyzing something or looking at particular case studies in their context? What do they look for? What do they find interesting? Because if they find something interesting, maybe in your own context, you'll find something similar that is interesting in your relationship with the world and with society. And then when you've looked at those things, you can ask yourself, how can I apply this to my own writing style? How can I make it part of the way that I comment about things? This is the value of making notes on a regular basis. If you've made notes carefully and systematically while you've been reading, and you've been underlining things, you will see how authors do things, and you'll also get ideas about how you may be able to do things in your own writing. Now, this may have been quite daunting, coming to terms with how you were going to read in an academic sense. Don't be fearful. Just go for it. Make a start, but also be sure to give yourself more than enough time to read carefully. I can guarantee you that when I mark your work, I can see immediately if you've put the work in or not. If you've left everything to the last minute and decided to write your essay the night before it's due, it's very easy for me to see. The reason is this: when you've taken the time to read something thoroughly, it sparks off all sorts of new ideas in your mind. And those ideas begin to show when you are writing. It's like a depth of understanding that people who read something very quickly don't get. The deeper that you read, the more that you're going to get from something. Okay, so I encourage you to start reading almost immediately when the semester starts. Make a time every day to do a little bit of reading so that you make sure that your project, this essay that you're writing for the end of the semester, is full and deep and interesting, so that I can see that you've actually grappled with what we've been trying to teach you this semester. Good luck, and I'm looking forward to reading your work.